Hey guys, Keon here with the Old School Labs, and in this video we're going to talk about the best arms in bodybuilding, in the history of bodybuilding or in the history of the world. We're going to do a top 5 list, but it's a short list really, and top 10 is a bit of a longer list, so I'm going to make a bunch of honorable mentions and my favorite top 5. If you are a fan of the sport, I'm sure you can already imagine who's going to make the top 3 or top 4, but before we get to my top 5 pick, let's talk about some other bodybuilders who are not that good to be in the top 5 of mine, but are still very good, they need to be mentioned. So for example, Ronnie Coleman, who had bigger arms than Ronnie. I mean, he had one of the biggest arms ever. Why isn't he making the top 5? Why are the top 5 guys better than him in this department? Well, inside chest, for example, Ronnie had insane arms. He had a really big and full arms, he had peaky biceps. But in the front double bicep, for example, even though they were insanely big, even in 2006 where he lost his title and he took second place, but I don't think he deserved it. I think he deserved to be at least fourth after Dexter and Victor and of course Jay. He had bigger arms than Dexter, for example, much bigger arms. So he definitely had a size, but that bicep kind of seemed small in proportion to his tricep in the front double bicep. And inside tricep, the triceps didn't have the best shape to them. So I can't really put him in that top 5, but he's the closest one from all the others who didn't make the top 5, probably. Next one we have is Paul Dillet. Proportionally speaking, he had probably the biggest arms ever because he overall looked like a freak, like a complete freak. His nickname was Jurassic Paul. So he looked like a dinosaur. I mean, he was insanely big, and those arms looked like 3 times the size of his head. That's one reason he deserves an honorable mention. Also the fact that his arms were actually huge. When he would rest them, when he would put them on the sides of his body, they looked insanely big. In the front double bicep, not so much, but that's still insane, yeah. Very, very big, but not the best shape. When I say not the best shape, I mean he would probably make the top 10 in the history of bodybuilding, but not the top 5, that's what I mean. Next up is Flex Wheeler, but before he injected a bunch of Synthol. After injecting it, it still looked pretty natural. I mean, not really. It was obvious, but it didn't lose the shape. He still had his recognizable shape, unlike Milo Sartre, for example, who actually used Synthol and completely destroyed the shape of his muscles. He didn't look like himself, he completely changed the shape. Flex didn't do that. His shape stayed the same, but it was obvious that there was a bunch of something in it. In those biceps, in those triceps, but in 1993, the arms looked absolutely aesthetic. I mean, he had those peaky biceps and super peaky triceps as well. The shape was just phenomenal and definitely deserves an honorable mention, even though his arms weren't exactly the biggest arms of all time. He overall wasn't the biggest guy back in the day. Of course, later in 1998, 1999, he gained so much muscle. He had to do it to be more competitive against guys like Ronnie. But I prefer his 1993 look because he was second at the Mr. Olympia and he was the most aesthetic that he ever was, and his arms looked great. He was not at his biggest, by far, not even close, but his waist was the smallest, and it's all about the waist if you ask me. You can have all the mass in the world, if you don't have a small waist, it means nothing. Literally nothing, in my opinion. And you guys might be thinking about Jay Cutler and saying that he had a bit wider waist and still looked super impressive, but that's also small waist if you ask me. There are guys with really huge waists, and Jay, he didn't have a super tiny waist, but his waist was good. And he also deserves an honorable mention. When he would relax his arms and put them aside, it didn't look that impressive. His biceps kind of didn't really attach super low, and there is one thing that really destroys the aesthetics, and it is the shape and the size of your veins. Actually, his bicep vein wasn't very thick, it wasn't that big, and it wasn't shaped the best. And that actually does hurt your aesthetics, believe it or not. So for that reason, and also the fact that his triceps weren't super complete, he didn't have the classic horseshoe. He had that front head overdeveloped and the rear head wasn't exactly that good. So it wasn't super complete, but why do I have him in my honorable mention? That's because of his biceps in the front double bicep. That's one of the best bicep peak of all time. You gotta agree. And combined with all the mass that he had in the triceps. So his arms were definitely big, they were huge. Hell yeah. And the biceps were super peaky in the front double bicep pose, so I give him also an honorable mention. Brandon Curry, the current Mr. Olympia 2019. Why don't I have him in my top 5? He has very complete arms. He has biceps, they are long, they are big, they're peaky. He has triceps, very complete. Overall great arms, really. The forearms are also there. Everything is spot on. I guess he was never really super shredded. He had that little bit more watery type of look. I guess it's insulin type of look. I'm not sure if that's the reason, but he never really came completely dry. And so I don't really see a lot of separation in his arms. I don't see lines when he flexes his biceps. I don't see feathers and cross striations on the triceps. I guess that's the reason why he doesn't make the top 5, but overall very, very impressive and huge arms. Robbie Robinson, one of the older guys from the golden era, an old school guy, who has very, very peaky biceps. That's his thing. Other than that, his arms weren't exactly super impressive overall. But the biceps were super peaky, and if this was the top 5 biceps in the history of the world, he would make the top 5. But it's arms. It's overall complete package when it comes to this muscle group, arms. I'm considering biceps, triceps, and forearms. So, Robbie Robinson doesn't make the top 5, but he definitely has an honorable mention. Are there amateurs or guys from different federations that are considered pros in their federations, but that's not really a pro? There is a guy called Michael Krijo, I believe that's how you pronounce his name, and he's one of the best bodybuilders in the IFBB, not Pro League, but Elite Pro. Now, they're also pros, and there are pros in every federation. There is a million federations out there. But in my eyes, and in the eyes of most people who follow bodybuilding, the real pros, the only real pros, are the ones that are competing at a Mr. Olympia level or the other pro shows in the IFBB Pro League. So, Michael Krijo is kind of a pro in IFBB Elite Pro, but I don't want to say that he is really a pro, so I would call him an amateur. But this guy has insane arms. I already made a video about him saying that he is the next Kevin Levrone, only taller. So he has really good arms, especially when he sets them down aside, but also when he does a front double bicep. Huge guy, very long and low inserted biceps, good triceps, overall very impressive set of arms. Cedric Macmillan, in the front double bicep, I don't like it at all. When he relaxes them on the side, when he does the bicep curls with dumbbells or with barbell in the gym, I find those arms super aesthetic and super impressive, and he's about my height, so he kind of motivates me to achieve something like that in the future. I know it's not gonna happen, I don't have the genetics like that, it may happen by some miracle, but that's what I would like to look like. And he has super impressive arms in the gym. On the stage also, when he puts them down aside, when he does the front double bicep, I don't like it at all. What about the classic physique guys? They are much smaller, yeah, we're not gonna mention man's physique, but in the classic physique, we have a guy who has insane arms, and he just moved to 212, but he was really good in classic as well. He had huge arms, now they're even bigger, they grew in the off-season. His name is Keon Pearson, I'm sure you guessed it, and this guy has insane set of arms. It's just one of the best shaped arms, well, I guess I can't say ever in the history of the world or the bodybuilding. It's a bold statement, but I'm sure you would agree with me. It's true. Those arms are super impressive, and I can't wait to see him in 212. On that 212 stage after he gains a lot more mass and comes super dry. Wow, those arms are just insane. Unfortunately, his chest is not matching the arms, so that kind of throws off the balance. But if you talk about the arms, one of the best arms in the world right now, even though he's classic, or now he's actually 212, but we saw him on stage only in classic and he looked phenomenal. Crazy arms. Sean Ray, I don't really have to say much about his arms or his entire physique. Overall, very complete package. He had everything. He was conditioned. He was a bit shorter, that's the only weakness that he had, but everything else, every muscle, he had it. Nothing super unique about his physique, aside from the fact that it was super aesthetic, and he was very complete. Arms looked great. I would prefer to see a bit bigger sweep on his triceps, but still, really, really good arms. What about the 212? Flexloids? Yep, you're Mr. Olympia. How many times? 6, 7 times in a row, who retired from 212 and is about to compete, hopefully this year, if Mr. Olympia happens, in the Open. And let me tell you, he's going to be a dangerous one up there. He has one of the best arms in the bodybuilding. Yeah. When he does the front double bicep, it's not that impressive, but when he puts them down aside, wow. Just super full arms. The triceps are popping. The biceps are popping as well. Very full, crazy forearms too. Just very, very good, very strong arms. Dexter Jackson. Not really much to say. I would say that his triceps kind of have the same problem as Ronnie's. He doesn't have that classical horseshoe. The biceps, though, are looking amazing. The forearms are also very good. In the front double bicep, he looks absolutely outstanding. The biceps are just taking over the entire stage. And his physique looks absolutely phenomenal in that particular pose. So definitely deserves an honorable mention. Nothing too special about Big Ramy, but his arms are big, just like everything else on his physique. If you talk about the old school guys, I also have to mention Sergio Oliva. Not the best biceps, not the most peaky biceps, but very long, and the triceps were super full. And when he would do his victory pose or crucifix pose, it would just look super full, super big, like the biggest arms you have ever seen at that point. So he definitely deserves an honorable mention. And as far as the current pros, who aren't exactly the top pros, I really like the arms of Ian Valliere when he holds them down aside. Not when he does the front double bicep. I don't really like to see that, but in the side tricep, side chest, and the most muscular, those arms are looking super duper freaky. Now, that's gonna be the last honorable mention. I'm sure I forgot many guys who had really good arms. If you have anybody on your mind, tell me down below. But now let's go with the top 5 actually. And the 5th spot, you may have guessed it, but it is Kevin Levrone. If you watched Kevin dumbbell curl those 100-pound dumbbells, if you watch him do any kind of exercises in the gym when he's pumped, you would definitely say this guy has the best arms in the history of the world, unless you have seen the other guys from the top 4. Kevin, in the front double bicep, not exactly perfect. There are guys who did it better. But in that side chest, side tricep, most muscular, when he's dumbbell curling in the gym, when he's just walking around, you cannot help but admire those super full and large arms. It just looks super aesthetic. It has to be said. It definitely has to be said. It is very, very aesthetic. If you are fans of bodybuilding, if you are fans of, man's physique or classic physique, you will find guys like, Jeremy Buendia aesthetic. But if you like bodybuilding, if you like mass, then you have to admit that Kevin had very aesthetic arms, especially considering his size. He was a freak, and those arms looked beautiful. I want to use that word. It looked beautiful. He deserves a 5th spot in this top 5 list. 4th spot has to be Arnold Schwarzenegger. Now, if you put Arnold on the same stage as Kevin, of course, Kevin would beat him. Probably anybody in that top 10 from the, let's say, 90s would beat Arnold, because it's a different era. Guys were way more complete, way bigger, and that's why. But for that era, and not just for that era, but the biceps. Who had better biceps, more complete biceps, the more impressive looking biceps? Even today, I cannot think of anybody really. Those arms had the best biceps of all time. In the front double bicep or front single bicep or any other pose that he would put his arms up, and also when he would put his arms down. The arms looked just freaky, and everybody wanted to have arms like Arnold back in the day, and even today. Those are really super impressive arms, but are they better than the arms of, for example, Rolly Winklaar? I would have to say no. Because Rolly has probably the biggest arms in the history of bodybuilding. I'm not sure about the measurements, but if you ask me, they look the biggest. The biceps, great biceps for sure, the forearms too, but the triceps of Rolly Winklaar were so massive that they made his arms look like other bodybuilders' legs. It's insane what you see here. This is just super freaky, as freaky as it gets, you can see the striations. You can see the cross striations on his triceps. You can see the veins. You can see the lines and the feathers all over his biceps when he's lean. So very, very impressive arms, but not better, in my opinion, than those of Phil Heath. This one is rather arguable. I think these guys are very close, Rolly and Phil, but I would choose Phil because he has better striations in the biceps, because he has more feathers, more cross striations on his triceps, and because of those crazy brachialis and radiobrachialis and overall forearms. That was the insane part about Phil. And that's all. There's also arm, right? That makes the arm. And overall, he has really big arms. In the front double bicep, I was never really a fan of the shape. He always seemed a little bit uncomfortable, especially in the later years. When he was younger, it looked better, but the arms didn't look as good as Rolly's, for example, in the front double bicep. Not that comfortable, right? But when he would relax them down the side, wow, just wow. The fullness, the striations and the veins, the way they were shaped, everything just looked super aesthetic and super large. But there is another guy, and I'm sure everybody knows who that is, who has the best arms in the history of bodybuilding, and I would have to go with Lee Priest. I don't think I need to explain this one. I think it's very obvious when you just see it. The guy was short. He was really short. But when you look at his physique, when he's standing alone there, you just have to admire those arms. They were perfect. He had striations on the biceps and on the triceps. The forearms were big. It was just super crazy. When he would relax them down the side and when he would lift them up in the double bicep poses, it just was magnificent. It was full. It was shredded when he would get lean, of course. And one of the biggest arms, proportionally speaking, but very, very aesthetically shaped. So that's gonna do it, guys. That's gonna be my top 5 list and all the honorable mentions. If you guys think I forgot somebody important, just let me know down below. There is so many great bodybuilders out there, and I'm sure I forgot somebody, so don't get offended if I did. Just let me know down below. And guys, if you want to watch more bodybuilding videos like this, you know what to do. Subscribe to this channel. All the best, guys, and keep it old school.